Ah, ah, hello and welcome to another episode of Educators, Performers, Creators. Enough nonsense. Welcome everyone to the episode number 20th of Educators, Performers, Creators. My name is Paulino Brener, and this has been a spur of the moment idea talking about Halloween on Halloween Day. And I found the perfect person to talk about this. He's also an educator, performer, and creator like myself, and he is really passionate about Halloween. His name is Christopher Yaeger. Hello, Christopher.
Hello, Paulino and group.
How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. It's one of my favorite holidays, and I'm thrilled to be here to share about it.
Perfect. So, as you might know, I am not from the United States. I'm from Argentina. So, I have to learn about Halloween when I came to this country. I mean, I learned before by reading and watching movies, and I have a little bit of cultural experience. When I first came to United States, I lived with a family that had a little boy, and I took him. That was my first Halloween. I took him trick or treating. I had a carving pumpkin party once, and then I had been to a few Halloween parties trying to with a costume or two. But other than that, I really don't know much about the tradition itself, even though I've been in this country for a long time. So we are here live to learn about some of the traditions related to Halloween from Christopher's perspective. If you're watching live with us, on YouTube, go ahead and type a comment with your story. Do you like Halloween? You don't like Halloween? What do you like Halloween? Was there something different about Halloween when you were growing up and now? Or if you have any questions for Christopher as you hear him talk, please also post it on YouTube and we'll make the best effort to answer them. So without further ado, who is Christopher Yeager? Who are you?
Well, hello, everyone. My name is Christopher. I'm based out of Minneapolis, Minnesota. I'm a dance educator. I've been teaching dance since around 1986. I'm listed with several rosters in the area, and I offer different dance workshops to kids from 3 to 93. My specialty is workshops or residencies where I go into a school and I'll work anywhere from 1 hour to 2 weeks. My primary love is folk dance. I was with a group called Ethnic Dance Theater, which, Paulino, that's where I met you. You were in that company for a while. And so
Definitely.
my training is really in folk dance, but I've bridged off and am doing thematic workshops now that focus either on a holiday or a specific range of countries. So I'll do virtual trips around the world so kids from today can experience movement, music, and the traditions from around the world.
Perfect. So let's start from the beginning. From the very beginning, when you were a kid, how was Halloween at that time? Were there anything special that your mom or dad used to do?
Well, I grew up in Minnesota, and my dad was a deacon in the Catholic Church. And so he didn't want to have anything to do with Halloween. My mom, on the other hand, was Scotch Irish, and she loved Halloween traditions. She brought with us the ghost stories, and we would always put on costumes. We would run around the neighborhood and get as much candy as we possibly could. Um, Minnesota is in the northern part of North America. So I remember one Halloween I wore a parka. It was so cold. I didn't even worry about a costume. I just wore my parka. It was just all about the candy. Um, but it was pretty low key. It was a small town, so we would go from door to door in costume. But there really wasn't any Halloween dance parties or any of the parades like you see today. But we did have the traditions where my mom she would decorate the house. Um, she was very superstitious. She believed in ghosts. Um, as a matter of fact, I believe, and I really do believe this is true, I grew up in a haunted house. There was a ghost in our house. I was convinced of it, and my mom was also convinced of it. So I think a lot of my beliefs have been passed down from my mom. But we would hear footsteps upstairs. We would hear the lights would go on or off, and I'm sure most of it was explainable, natural. But who knows? There might have been a ghost. I do have one scary story growing up. Um, my sister and my mom were fighting like mothers and daughters fight, and they went to bed just incredibly angry and hateful toward each other. And that night the ghost reappeared, but this time it was a wolf, and it literally walked across the wooden floor. We all heard it. I sat up in bed, I heard it. um, it walked through my sister's door, sat at the foot of her bed, and growled, and then jumped up over her bed and then disappeared. And my mom woke up out of bed, and I woke up out of bed, and we ran, and they made up, and they stopped being mad at each other. But it was like that kind of stuff happened in my house growing up. So even today, I believe that ghosts can wander the earth. And one of the traditions that is important this time of year, and it really shows up in a lot of Northern European stories, is that the veil between the living and the dead this time of year is very thin. So they believe that the dead can walk through on the earth. And so there's many ghost stories. The Irish and the Scots talk about the bogeyman, which has turned into our modern day boogeyman. But they were mischievous spirits that used to scare you. And so my mom grew up with those stories, and she would kind of threaten us that the bogeyman was going to come and get us if we didn't behave. But
Wow.
they never did.
You never did, yes.
And we did misbehave.
In
Um,
Argentina, we also had, of course, well, nowadays, I was reading the paper today. Nowadays, there are many Halloween parties in Argentina, not when I was growing up, but we did have many characters to scare children to do their homework, to finish their food, or to
right,
nap, our famous
sure.
siesta. So if you go out in the siesta, El Viejo de la Bolsa, the man of the bag,
Yes.
or El Pombero, all these
See,
different characters
see,
that they
see.
used to.
Well, El Dia de Muertos. That's
Yes,
big.
now that's more of a Mexican tradition that a lot of people think relate to Halloween because it happens at the same time, but it has a very distinctive value and relationship with the people who passed away. So I want to make sure that everyone knows that Halloween and Day of the Dead are not the same celebration with different names. We can
Exactly.
talk about Day of the Dead another time, El Dia de
Sure,
los
sure.
Muertos, but a lot of people think they are the same with different names because they happen around the same time, but they're very,
They
very
they
different.
they are very different, but they're similar in the sense that they honor the dead, and you recognize your deceased. And so Halloween, of course, comes from All Hallows Day, which is All Saints Day, and then that's November 1st. So the eve of All Hallows Day is Hallows Eve, which has become Halloween. And so I think of Halloween as a celebration of death, but not just death, but the death of the calendar year, because Halloween is an example of a Christian holiday that adopted pagan traditions, and Samhain, which is one of the Celtic um, Druid pagan holidays, happens this time of year. Um, the the Sabbats, they're called. There's 8 of them. They're 6 weeks apart. The ones that most people are familiar with are the summer solstice, the winter solstice, the fall equinox. But the ones people aren't so familiar with are the ones that happen 6 weeks in between those. So 6 weeks in between the first day of fall and the first day of winter is November 1st. So this is Samhain. And in the pagan tradition, this was the end of the calendar year. And if you think about it, here in Minnesota, the trees are all losing their leaves, the gardens are all dying. the dark is encroaching, and so it does make sense that the year or that death is prevalent, and um, and then in the pagan tradition, um, the winter solstice is when the male god is reborn, and now we have Christmas, so the rebirth of the sun. And so those traditions are what the Catholic Church, specifically the Catholic Church, adopted and made into other holidays.
How did you learn
So
about
Samhain,
how did you learn about these pagan traditions?
I was with a group. I joined a group, and it was a neo pagan group. So we weren't incredibly serious about it. Like our rituals were pretty tame, but we got together every 6 weeks. So for like 7 years, this was after college, so it was in my 20s and 30s. We would get together every 6 weeks and recognize the time of the year, and it makes so much sense. So in the fall, you prepare to for the harvest, and you pull things in to get ready to go inside. And my battery is going out. Am I losing you?
I cannot see you right now, but hopefully you can find your your cable very quickly.
All right,
um, so
back.
we are by, yes, there you are. There you
Okay.
are. Okay, we are live, and actually, that's a good segue. I have a message from Catherine. Hello, Catherine.
Hey,
She's
Catherine.
always watching all my shows. She's a great supporter, and she says, "I am no longer a fan of Halloween and haven't been for more than 20 years. Don't I sound like a party pooper?" Yes, Catherine, you do. But Catherine is a lot of fun for many other things. We meet. She's a language teacher like myself, and
Sure.
she have many other celebrations related to language and culture. She says it's fun for the kids, though. Definitely, it is. So not all adults celebrate Halloween. They think it's mainly for the kids, um, and just for the trick or treating. But you are talking about some things that people now do that involve more adults in this celebration.
I'm careful about Halloween because pop culture and especially the movies have turned Halloween into an unleashing of hell, and all the demons come out, and the slasher movies, and um, in the entertainment business, they call it the wow factor. And the wow factor is you've got to be impressed at a certain level, but the only way you're impressed is if it's a little bit higher the next time. So I don't advocate the slasher evil killing part of Halloween either. Um, and I'm cautious because um, Halloween to me is not that psycho murder that people are turned off by, or they're seduced by it. Either way, but um, death. It's a celebration of death, and so death is something. Well, first of all, I don't believe in death. I think that our bodies die, but there's a part of us that live on. I'm not sure what tradition it is, but there's a belief that if you can see somebody's image in your mind's eye, that's their spirit. So you're actually seeing their spirit. So on November 1st, All Saints Day is a time to recognize that spirit that has passed. And so I think when we die, that spirit goes on. In the Catholic tradition, if you weren't as holy as you could be, you wouldn't go to heaven right away. You might go to purgatory. And purgatory is in between heaven and hell. And of course, growing up a Catholic, we were taught that purgatory existed. And back in the Middle Ages, they were talking about purgatory, but you could have the remaining people in your family pray your way out of purgatory. So if you were in purgatory, if there were enough people that were praying for you, they would help you be free of purgatory. And so in the Middle Ages, some of the poor people, or the people that had more time on their hands, I guess, would go from door to door this time of year, knock on the door in exchange for cakes or biscuits. They would pray for the dead relatives so that they would, be free of this purgatory. And that was the tradition that started the trick or treating.
Oh,
So
wow.
it actually goes back to a time where people used to pray. They did it in Egypt as well. In Egypt, when they um, undug, dug up, what's his name, King Tut. He had a bunch of little dolls, and those were prayer dolls. And so you would buy these dolls, and you could buy yourself out of hell. So personally, this is my own opinion. I don't believe in heaven and hell. I think they're both here. So if you're in heaven, you're happy, full of love. Things are lucky. You're surrounded by people that adore you, and you adore them, and life is good. When you're in hell, you hate yourself. You hate everybody. The world sucks. So I don't think you have to die to go to that place.
No, no, we can leave it right here, right now. You're right.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
So I understand your listener that Halloween is not enjoyable because of that reason. But the masks, the masquerading, that is some. It's funny. It's a love hate with masks. Some people are very good with costumes. They'll just embrace costumes and dress up. In most of the traditions, there's a day of the year where you can be somebody else, and in the Jewish tradition, it's Purim. There, it's like Halloween. They all dress up, and you can be somebody else because I think there's something in human nature where every once in a while you just got to let your hair down or relax a little. And if you're told you can't do that, then you do it in some sideways manner. But if you're given a day where you can do it, and then do it safely, and I think that's the category that Halloween comes in is you can dress up and pretend to be somebody else.
or you could become an actor and pretend to be somebody else any time of the year.
Seriously, or a teacher. Teachers
Or
are
a teacher.
performers too. I mean, there's times you got to put on a personality to be a teacher too.
Perfect. So, Christopher, you talked about think different traditions growing up and related to Halloween. Now, in your professional life now, what are some of the things or examples that you connect this celebration and maybe others with dancing and teaching?
I've put together some holiday workshops. Halloween is one. I do a rock around the Christmas tree holiday party. I do a nod to St. Patrick's, so I do an Irish traditional thing where I bring in the elements of music and dance that are attributed to these holidays. And Halloween, there's been several waves of Halloween related music. Starting back in the teens, there's some Irish folk who came over and sing about the haunted stories of the queen that had her head under his arm. That's a song that goes way back. But in the 1930s, Louis Armstrong and Cab Calloway, they were both famous for some of their Halloween theme music. Louis Armstrong did Spooks. Google Spooks. It's on YouTube. It's a great song. It talks about spooks in the house and what the spooks do, and the lines are incredibly clever. Like one of them talks about the guy says this to his spouse. I thought I told you to stay underground, but you sure look good tonight. As a matter of fact, you look a fright. It's just clever lyrics. Cab Calloway did St. James Infirmary, which was a famous song, and Betty Boop. There's Betty Boop cartoons from the 1930s that reflect a lot of the Halloween. Like she has a Halloween party as one of her cartoons. And Betty Boop is an example of a cartoon that wasn't intended for children. It was intended for adults. So the Betty Boop cartoons do that. And then in the 1950s, we get a whole slew of doo-wop. There's all of this 1950s style rock and roll, jitterbug style music that is all in the doo-wop style. So you can swing, you can do some the twist, the frug, the watusi. Going into the 60s, of course, you get the Monster Mash. That was a huge sensation. And at the same time, there was the television shows, the Munsters. I knew we all grew up on the Munsters. And there they started making these creatures friendly and comedic. And that's really my first introduction to monsters. So monsters never really scared me. I mean, Herman Munster, he's like the most gentle thing in the world. But then there's the Addams Family. And the Addams Family, if you get a chance to watch some of those old shows, Gomez, the husband, does almost all of the fad dances. They do the Watusi, they do the Frug, they do the Freddy, they do the twist. There's even the butler. What was his name? Lurch. You rang. He's a famous, he was Lurch. Well, that some pop group did a song called The Lurch. And so I do the dances using that music. So my Halloween dance parties, we frug, we Watusi, we do the Holly Gully, um, Monster Mash, of course. So it's just it's playful. It's not evil. I personally don't believe in evil. If you look at the word evil, it's the word live backwards. Huh, I think that's so clever. So I think when you're living backwards or doing something you're not intended to do or something that's not natural to you, then there's evil ways that way. Um, and then of course Michael Jackson. I nod my hand to that boy. He really changed the world. Thriller is probably one of the most quintessential Halloween tracks out there. And it's not easy doing that Thriller, that routine. That's out there. Vampira, she was big in the 80s. Um, so I use those different decades, not only to teach those American fad dances, but also just to give people a playful experience with Halloween and to keep it. I mean, it is dark up here in Minnesota. Tomorrow is daylight savings time, so it's going to get dark around 5 o'clock in the afternoon.
Oh,
So in the pagan tradition, there's the dark half of the year and the light half of the year, and we're just about to go into the dark.
dark. Yes. Just to go, just to go deeper into our beings, reach out, and then come back with a lot of light.
Yes, yes, yeah. And there's something about candlelight in the deep dark that's just enchanting. Curl up to a nice book with a candle and go to bed at 8 o'clock. Why not? In the old days, people used to get 10 or 12 hours of sleep in the winter. So if you feel like going to bed at 8, go for it.
There we are. So here I like to share with people your profile page at the Colts Center. That's through you do all this worship through the Colts Centers. Is that correct?
Yeah, the Cole Center is a flagship for dance. They have a roster of artists on one of their rosters. We offer both live workshops where the teaching artists will go into the schools and work with a group of kids, or we also offer video conferencing workshops. And the video conferencing workshops, I did 9 Halloween dance workshops this week, and a couple of them were up in Canada, a couple of them in New York, a couple in California. So it's really awesome. Here I am doing the Scarecrow. Did you see that? There's Bee's Knees. That's a 1920s style. There's the Charleston Walk. So my specialty, I morphed away from folk dance, even though I still do folk dance, but I'm more interested in American dance styles. And so here I am doing Charleston moves. Um, and they were from the late 1920s, but then that turned into swing, and swing in the 1930s. One of my Halloween dances that turned the kids into skeletons, and we do these old dance steps from the 1930s swing vocabulary. So it's a I think it's a playful, innocent way of introducing kids to American dance forms. Um, of course, the United States gave the world rock and roll music, and so the majority of my Halloween music is rock and roll. And it's just interesting to take a holiday that can be looked at as dark and vicious and add that playful side to it, and enjoy it.
Perfect. Well, Christopher, thank you very much for sharing all, not just your expertise, but part of your life and your stories growing up. This was a lot of fun. If people want to get in touch with you, what should they do? Should they go to the
I would go to the Coles website. colescenter.org. You can contact me through the workshops there. Every year, the Coles gets a grant that offers 250 free workshops to local area schools. So if you get in on that early enough, you can have me for free, which is fantastic. My specialty, of course, is American social dances, but I also do what I call a virtual trip around the world. So it's really great with the younger kids where I take them on Imagination Airlines and we fly around the room and then we land and we pretend we're in Russia. And I'll speak to them in Russian a little bit. And we'll play Simon Says. Instead of Simon Says, it becomes Ivan Gavarit. Ivan Gavarit, Ruki na Galavu. It's fun that way. Um, but it's really about introducing children to cultures from around the world. The Halloween that we celebrate today really does come from England, Scotland, and Ireland. But once it hit our terracotta here, we changed it in such a way that it's become much, much more commercial. And it's the second biggest selling holiday next to Christmas now because of all the candy and costuming and everything. But if you look at Halloween as the death of the year, and start recognizing it's time to move in. The community aspect of it is, especially in Minnesota, it's cold enough here that you could actually die if you didn't have the proper housing or a good job or a good car. And so bringing it back home is part of what the dark does for us. But my workshops are a lot of fun. I teach people of all ages. One more plug I want to put in is I just started doing something with Movement Wise through the Cole Center where I teach older adults. And so I'm teaching people from 55 to 90 every Wednesday night at the Cole Center. So even the older adults are still dancing. You're never too old to dance.
You're never too old to dance.
Yep.
That's if you can walk, you can dance.
Yes, there's a lot of truth in that saying. And if you can dance your way through life and think of these holidays as a celebration, and that's what I think of life as a celebration, and I think of dance as the roadmap. So it helps you navigate through. Um, and literally, somebody I read it just this morning that says if you're sick, ask yourself this question: why are you not dancing? Why are you not singing? Why are you not, loving your family? So it's like sickness happens when you are not celebrating or not embracing life for what it has to offer.
Perfect. Christopher, thanks again. If you want to get in touch with Christopher, for those watching live or watching the recording of this show, look in the description of this video. You'll find the link to Christopher's profile at the Cult Center, or go to the Cult Center. I believe it's cultcenter.org, and search for Christopher Yaeger, Yaeger. Was that correct?
That's correct, Paulino. Thank
Great.
you so much. Thank you so much for doing this. And all your educators out there, um, if you can find ways to keep people moving through their classes, like I have another class called Animate American History where they bring the social dance aspect to life. Moving through the classes is such an empowering way to learn the material. So instead of just talking at them, getting them to move while they're learning is just dynamic. So thank you,
You're
Paulino.
welcome. You're welcome. And I agree so much on that. My classes are always full of movement myself. So thank you, Christopher. Thank you, everyone. And I hope you join us in the next Educators, Performers, Creators show. Maybe I should go out with another monster. And I want to wish you
Happy
all
Halloween!
happy Halloween. Ha 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 ha. Bye bye.